in my case, if my brother calls me, and if we speak on the phone, and even if I'm in public places, I just go like, "Shqaqih, saqar, good afternoon, good morning, what are you doing?" And people just stare at me like, "What's this stranger doing?"
Welcome to a Face Project podcast. Face Project podcast.
Hello?
It's just pure life. It's pure
And my
innocence.
mom
it's
is a
pure
writer.
gratitude.
So I ended up in America.
I am an adopted Korean and have been all my life.
It's a perfect blend of science and creativity.
I was screaming, I will live over here till I die.
Hi everyone, welcome to a Face Project podcast. Stories told by people from around the world that help to broaden our understanding of the human experience. My name is Natalie Jennings, I'm your host, and this is episode number 18. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I am on the road with a little bit of a different mic setup, so if you notice a change in audio quality, my apologies. The same goes for the story that you're about to hear today. It was recorded in Antigua, Guatemala. We had a little bit of a difficult time trying to find a quiet space, so there's some traffic noise, some echoing noise. Thanks for bearing with me. I've been on the road a lot the last couple of months. I'm recording this in Kona, Hawaii, and as I said, this episode you're about to hear was recorded in Guatemala last month. I had the opportunity to sit down with Alejandro and hear about his take on the small Mayan village that he was born and raised in. He is one of very few people in the area that speak fluent English, so the opportunity to speak with Alejandro was very welcomed, and it was an incredibly edifying and fun interview to do, so I hope that you enjoy it. In this episode, you'll hear Alejandro talk about his take on his culture, on Western culture and his experience in America, and how he feels about the prevalence of Western influence in the world, and his thoughts on that. Before we get into today's story, I just want to draw your attention to our new Facebook group called A Face Project Community. We're hoping to use this space for as a place for people to share their stories, little snippets, photos and captions, feedback on the episodes, as a general place for people to connect if they find reason to connect due to the content of each episode. Every episode is a little different, so we're hoping just to build a space for community. So again, that's on Facebook, and it's A Face Project Community, and that's the name of the group. We hope to see you there. Finally, just before we get into this story, if you haven't subscribed to our podcast, head on over to iTunes or Google Play Music and subscribe to the podcast. We come out with new episodes bi-monthly, and your support really helps us to grow. So we appreciate it, and thank you to all of our regular listeners. If you are a regular listener and you enjoy this podcast on a regular basis, consider becoming a contributing member. Our work here at A Face Project is not done for free. There's definitely a cost involved in producing our bi-monthly podcast, as well as our quarterly print and digital magazine. So if you're enjoying this content, if you're enjoying the photo essays on the website and in the magazine, if you're enjoying hearing perspectives from all over the world, consider donating 5, 10, whatever you can a month, and becoming part of our community to help us continue doing this work that we love to do. So again, that's over at afaceproject.com. Without further ado, let's get into today's story. Here is Alejandro.
do we go now?
The times that I've spoken my language in different ways, especially when I went to the States, I got the comment that, is that German? Is that German? I'm like, nope, it sounds just as good, but it's not German. It's Kakchiquel. The language is Kakchiquel. It's from the Quiche family. Tokkoak ayevas, tokkoak ashon, mantamestach, chikohon avachbil rishtker shkato. And that means when you are in sadness, when you have difficulties and problems, remember that there's always a friend who's going to help you. Alejandro sounds more fancy down here, but it's more difficult for Americans to say it. So, but in the States, Harrison, it's easier and people remember that. So I play with that. Harry, Harrison, Alejandro, and I am from Patzun, Chimaltenango. Just like a regular Guatemala family, my parents had to decide where I should have gone to school, and that was in 1998. And back then, they couldn't pay for school. My dad, my biological dad, here in Guatemala, he decided to be a pastor. So, you know, pastors here, they don't have a wage. They just get whatever the church can provide them, which at the time, it's not big, it's not much. I was living not in really good conditions as far as housing, food. So we were 4 brothers and 2 sisters to make up a family of 8. We knew that a private school was better education. I didn't know that I was going to learn English then. I just thought I was going to get a better education. We said, well, let's go to San Bartolo, which is close here in Antigua. And that's where I got my 4th and 5th grade. Then I got my 7th, 8th, and 9th. And during this time, that's when I met an American family in this orphanage. And that's where I learned most of my English, because I lived with Americans. And we just became friends. It was like a mother-son relationship during this time without us knowing that it was actually that way. They started paying at some point my education. So then I was able to go back to my original family, back into Patzun, with their support. I decided that I wanted to go to college, and they kept supporting me in college, so I went here to the National University. We tried in the beginning to get me a visa so that I could go to the States and visit and browse colleges and see what options, but that didn't work out. I was denied the visa twice. So I actually applied at UAH, University of Alabama in Huntsville, and I got accepted. I did all the documentation, but then I had gone to college 2 years already. So I did the paperwork to transfer those credits to UAH. Wow. And then I just graduated in 3 years and a half. And then I came back to Guatemala in 2012, just because I wanted to get back here. Well, I miss everything about Guatemala. The landscape overall. Up there in Alabama, all you see is just flat. I can see big differences now because I've been in 2 sides of the world. I know that there are parts in Guatemala in which they live like North Americans. What is a basic need, something that is really basic in the US, it's a luxury in Guatemala. For example, you get tap water all day long in the States, but in Guatemala, you get 1 hour of water a day, if you're lucky. Or sometimes you just get water 3 times a week. Sewage system, right? There are places here in which you still find big holes. Just people dig down the hole, make a toilet out of it. So for us to have toilets and a great sewage system, that would be a luxury for us. And I'm speaking for most of the population. I'm not speaking for 100% of the population because I'd be lying, but that's what the average Guatemalan does. My town is Patzun. It's one city in the state of Chimaltenango, and Guatemala's got 22 states. 90% of the people there, they're from Mayan descent. So people there mainly women, they don't use Western style clothing. They have their traditional huipil, top, cord tape, the bottom part. The men, the elderly men, they use their typical men outfit, but men are getting more of the Western clothing type. The people in my town, we've been there all of our time, and our parents and our grandparents have been there all their lives. So, I mean, we're pretty much natives to the area. It's a good community feeling because you know everyone, and everyone knows what everybody's doing. So, it's a small community. It's different from the city though, because in the city you just don't know anybody. But in town, it's like, you know, everybody, you go to the street and walk, go downtown, go to the square. Usually every square has a fountain, so everybody hangs around the fountain. And people buy and sell stuff, yeah. There's a culture of undermining the Maya. And ever since the Spanish came here, they made us seem, the Mayan, inferior to them. Generally speaking, the Mayan person or the indigenous person is less educated than, you know, the Ladino Guatemalan. So having said that, I want to clarify a couple of things. And what happens is that the Mayan people feel as though they're discriminated. Well, we feel discriminated because the government doesn't pay attention to us like they do in bigger cities. With this discrimination, the Mayan people have tried to change their ways of living, their ways of speaking, to the extent that our languages are almost extinct. I mean, there's a big population speaking, but if you find a Mayan person with their Mayan outfit, they'll probably speak to you in Spanish because they are afraid that they are being double discriminated because of their outfit and because of the language they speak. If they're women, that's triple discrimination, right? Because they're also women. So that's why a lot of people just decide not to say that they speak Mayan. I don't see it that way because I want to let the people know that I value my culture, that I value the language that I was born with and that I was raised with. And I'm not ashamed of that. For example, I mean, a simple example. In the metro, the bus metro in Guatemala City, you see a lot of people speaking in Spanish. I mean, 100% Spanish. But their clothing says something different about them. And here's what I saw the other day. The other day there was a woman with her Mayan typical clothing. She gets a phone call and she starts speaking in Spanish, broken Spanish. So she prefers on speaking broken Spanish than her Mayan language, which I think is wrong. In my case, if my brother calls me and if we speak on the phone, and even if I'm in public places, I just go like, good afternoon, good morning, what are you doing? You know, and people just stare at me like, what's this stranger doing? That's how people look at me, you know. But I don't see it, I don't get offended by it because I do it because I'm identifying myself with the culture. I don't get offended anymore. I mean, I just look at it in a different way. I mean, it happens to everybody. For example, people from Africa, they forget their language and they decide to go French or English. I mean, why should we think that we are better than others? We're different. Yes, of course, we're different color, different skin, but that makes us unique, right? It's a very fine line, because if you want to change your ways of doing things, you will. And no one is going to stop you from doing that. But what keeps you on with your culture and your language is the benefit that you see in practicing your culture and your language. I mean, what benefit brings me to speak Mayan or Kakchiquel? To me, personally, it brings me personal satisfaction, because I'm an educated person, and people show off when they say, well, I speak French, I speak Italian, I speak German. Then why can't I show off that I know how to speak Kakchiquel? That's the way I see it. So if I have to say something, is just be proud of your own language. Think of it as not inferior, but just as good as Spanish, English, German, just as good, just as fancy. So it doesn't matter if I deny my heritage, deny my language, I'm still Mayan. And that's what keeps me moving and saying, I'm going to be a different Mayan person. And I wish to see more Mayan lawyers, Mayan physicians wearing their outfits. Why not? Why do we have to accommodate ourselves to the Western world when the Western world can accommodate to our customs? Someone from the US said, why don't you worry about your own country and don't compare yourself to us? So it really got into me, and I thought about it really serious. And to those who do not know anything outside the United States, or just anybody whom is used to stay at home, comfort zone, I have to say, is don't be judgmental. Don't be judgmental to the ways of living of other people. Because while you enjoy the benefits of a good government, other countries are trying to develop a government. And that's what's happening in most of the third world countries. So when we talk about politics, when we talk about issues in regards of why do we do mission trips, why do you guys do this, I mean, why don't people take care of their own issues, that's being judgmental. And I think that people really need to do the field work, right? I mean, in the US, a doctor graduates with doctor practice. They already practice. And that's what we should do in life, everybody. Everybody should know the world not by books, but by going into the field and knowing how it really works. Then you'll have a better and critical way of thinking. Don't be judgmental. Go to other countries, and if you really want to experience, you have to see it firsthand. Don't take my word. Come to Guatemala.
Where do we go now?
This episode was recorded and produced by me, web layout and design by Aaron Woods, and the music you heard today was by Mato, Wayuhi. The song that we featured touches on the continuous atrocities that the Native American community faces. If you are interested in hearing the full-length version of this song, please stay tuned to the end of this episode. We will play the entire thing for you, and it is well worth a listen. Mato is a very talented musician. One final note to leave you with before we dive into the song. If you haven't given us a review on iTunes, consider heading over to iTunes and just leaving a short review. Reviews help not only other listeners to find podcasts like ours, but it also helps us to reach more people and establish ourselves a little bit more in the podcasting community. So for those of you that have reviewed, thank you very, very much. We really, really appreciate it. One more thing, if you enjoy these podcasts and you'd like to also see photographs of our storytellers, there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can head over to afaceproject.com and look through the podcast episode posts where you'll find portraits of each of our storytellers. You can also subscribe to our magazine. It is a print magazine published quarterly, and it is also available in web format in a digital PDF that you can download. So for more information on checking out photos of our storytellers, head on over to afaceproject.com. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at afaceproject. So thank you for becoming a part of our ever-growing community, and we look forward to sharing more with you guys very soon. See you in a couple weeks.
Where do we go now? 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 It occurred to me while polishing my verses, I'm descended from a family with blemishes from governmental curses. We know supplements will hurt us, but with this lack of trust dispersed in our views, how can we feel comforted by the red, white, and blue? I'm in Oglala Sioux, and I intend to honor those who cross the Calvary with sharpened bows and arrow use. It ain't a fluke to assume that the settlers rebuke to let us presume, since our fumes smoke of unity and plumes. I rebel when I can, just to honor them. Do I adapt to modern worlds, or do I clutch the stem that sends me to the ancestors, festering from diseases possessed by Western Europeans? My friends are always seeing that I am fiending for success. It's never been about the fame, it's cause for my family I want best. And when I see another silver spoon succeed, I weaken. So for myself I built a beacon. Where do we go now? 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 It's hard to live with the misery of knowing that history misses picking on me and my kind. Like this shit is fucking elementary. Thick skin can only better me. Rich gin will only settle down my mental scheme. My kin can't really relate to my scars. Empathy won't equal equality. Probably be problematic as I age. Only progress will quiet my rage. That and cat is a sage. I do it for the love, fuck a wage. Where do we go now? 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 I gotta go in a cage, in a freaking cage, and fucking suffocated in these suburbs. There's gonna be a change. There's gonna be a change. I gotta go.